Yes, good morning. So as Stacy said, my name is Sarah Ottow, and I've been working most of my time as an educator in the classroom. But most recently, I've worked as a reading specialist for the school district of Waukesha and helped implement our balanced literacy program there. And I'm really excited to be here today. I think it's really wonderful that we're coming around this idea of what is literacy and drawing on the strengths and all the experience in this room to make things more consistent and work for your students better. So thank you so much for being here. I want to get to know you a little bit, and I did get the chance to chat with a couple people before we got started. But I wanted to maybe take some notes about who you are and what it is that you do to try to help support you a little bit more. And I was hoping that you could tell me something that you did this summer. Can everybody see the PowerPoint? Can somebody read it to us?
Now that he had an iPad, Martin realized that training spot to bring him his newspaper each morning may not have been the wisest move.
Okay, so I don't have an iPad, but I'm imagining if I had my dog fetch it as if she were fetching the newspaper, that might be a problem. So, you know, just kind of illustrating the shift that we have in reading. Does anybody here have a Kindle or an iPad? Some kind of electric reader? A couple of you? Yeah, I don't have one yet, but I've heard that they're fun. And I have been doing a lot of reading this summer. I've also been gardening, which is a fun hobby. Gets me outside in the sunshine. So I'd love it if we could just whip around real quick, and if you could tell me your name, the grade that you teach, or the classrooms that you support, either as a specialist or an aide. And I'm just going to make some notes so I kind of know which grade levels are where. Would you like to start over here?
Sure. My name is Mary Jo. I am a interventionist with the first grade last year, but it probably will change currently this year.
Great.
And what else?
If you'd like to share something about your summer.
Busy summer. I have 3 kids that are in like 3 activities apiece. So yeah, that's a busy summer.
Thank you.
I'm Claudine Salmon, and I'm an aide. And I kind of fluctuate between classrooms. Last year I was in the first grade, 4th grade. Yeah, those were the main, first and 4th. And I too have 3 children, and I think just carting them around to different activities, baseball and softball. That was my summer.
Keep it busy. Yeah, thank you.
I'm Diane Paschal. The last 12 years I've been in 6th grade. Now I'm going back to special ed.
Okay.
And I think I have 1st and 2nd and 5th and 6th.
Okay.
As my grade levels this year. And my kids are in college, but they're home for the summer, so they're in and out. So I've just been, and my son just had major surgery, so I've been taking care of my baby, 21-year-old.
My name is Kay Hoff, and I've been a aide with middle learners at 4th grade
Okay.
for the past 5 or 6 years, and so I guess my new job will be with the kindergarten as an aide in kindergarten. I've been listening to 3 of our 4 children got married within 9 months, so had 2 this summer, so it's busy.
Wonderful. Thank you.
I'm Shannon Ward. I'm an aide in the K-4 class. This is my 2nd year here. I've been involved with a couple weddings as well.
Fun. Thank you.
I'm Ellen Restock. I'm a special ed aide for K through 5th grade, and my eldest daughter got married this summer.
Lots of weddings.
I'm Sue Lozinski, and I was an interventionist in 3rd grade. And I spend my time at the Lozinski Resort, and I spend my pool.
Ooh. That sounds nice. Are you going to be doing more of that after today? Before school starts?
I'll be entertaining teenagers. Not teenagers anymore, adults. Excuse me, they're adults. That's right. 2 daughters. So.
I'm Major Ramsey, and I teach the K-4 kids.
Great.
And I have 2 kids, so we've just been enjoying the summer, doing stuff with friends.
Great. Thank you, Angie. In the back?
My name is Linda Jensen, and I run the library here. And I've got 2 kids also. One was home from college, so we're busy.
Okay. Great. And the library is such a big piece of literacy, so I'm glad you could be here.
Claudia Beck, I teach second grade and spend most of my time at the Cumberland Resort Pool.
Aha.
And on the lake.
Wonderful. And your first name again?
Claudia.
Claudia. So a Claudine and a Claudia.
We're not
Thank
in
you. Thank you.
I'm Jennifer Cumberland. I've been spending my summer pretty much tutoring, I think.
Okay.
I'll never do it so many again. Believe me. Been reading When Readers Struggle again for the second time. It's a good book as well. And Laying by the Pool.
Good for you. Thanks, Jennifer.
Mark. I'm having a hard time getting back into work here a little bit, as you can tell. It's been a good summer, a couple of trips. One farm aid tomorrow. Got it?
Thanks for being here, Mark.
Beth Ingersoll, I'm teaching second grade for the first time this year. I formed in 4K and 5K.
Okay.
My summer was very busy teaching summer school and finishing my master's.
Good for you.
Now I'm 3.
Wonderful. How does that feel?
Wonderful.
Yeah. Liberating.
I'm Amy Plank, and I'm a speech pathologist, and I moved from Bayview to Pewaukee last weekend.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Welcome to Lake Country.
Thank you.
I'm Emily Carlton. I'm a speech pathologist, and we've just been having a fun summer with no schedule. It's been nice.
Oh, nice. Great.
Hi, I'm Robin LeClaire, formerly Letterbury, and I teach kindergarten here. I've been doing yoga 2 days a week, riding my bike, and I'm singing a lot. I'm trying to sing more. I'm a performer.
Oh, how wonderful. And a kindergarten teacher.
Yeah,
Go hand in hand.
I do my best.
Thanks, Robin.
Hi, I'm Leanne Mulholland, and I'm a kindergarten teacher too. And let's see, this summer had a lot of family visiting, and so it's been nice to have the time off to do that.
Thanks, Leanne.
Amy Larson, I teach first grade, and I have 2 kids that have kept me busy all summer, having fun, but they keep me on my toes.
Busy.
Yes.
Great. Great. Thanks.
I'm Ann McCormick. I also teach first grade. And I have 3 kids. I have a pool, but have not spent a lot of time around it because
I did turn it on, excuse me, I did turn it on.
Oh, you did?
Should be
Okay,
yeah.
never mind.
Try not to get anybody in the way.
Okay.
Thanks, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
please go ahead. 3
I
kids.
have 3 kids. 2 had tonsillectomies and 1 had wisdom tooth out. So I have not been outside a medical facility any 1 week since I left.
So you need to get to the pool, by the way.
It's right there. It's hard to get there.
Yeah, not a lot of time. Well, thanks for being here today.
Nancy Mahoney, first grade interventionist and a guidance teacher also.
Okay.
And my husband and I are happy empty nesters.
Excellent. Congratulations. Somebody's happy. Well, great. Well, nice to get to know a little bit about you as we get moving here. I know, as Stacy said, you have different backgrounds. So just a quick show of hands, who is kind of familiar with Fountas and Pinnell's work and either the assessment system that you may have been using doing the running records? Excuse me. Okay. Or any of their other work. This one is more for intermediate, but maybe other people have read this one or the When Readers Struggle. Great. And that is just one body of work. What's great about literacy is that it brings together all different people, all different practitioners, researchers, and so forth. So we're gonna use this as a base. I'll show you some of the resources that you're going to be getting and that you'll take with you today to work with you. And I just picked this one text because I think it's really one of the best that synthesizes a lot in the field. So as we go through that today, you'll notice that I'll reference them a lot. And then hopefully that'll help you in your practice as you start to plan for the school year. Okay, so as Stacy said too, any burning questions or concerns that come up, feel free to grab some Post-its, write them down, and if I don't answer them, I really want to make sure that we do get your voices heard. So during the break, you will have a chance to throw them up on the parking lot, and we'll work with you to try to answer those either now or throughout the year. Our agenda today is going to be pretty much at a quick clip. We have a lot to get through. What I'd like to do is give you an overview of what is balanced literacy, and within that, talk about what are the Common Core standards. Have anybody here really heard of the Common Core standards yet? We're just kind of coming down the pipe, so some of us might be less familiar with that than others. But we're going to come together around an understanding of what they are and why we need to know about them, and how we can start implementing the common standards in our work with students right away this fall. We're going to spend a little bit of time looking at running records, talking about how they can inform our instruction, and then you as primary teachers and aides, how perhaps you can start thinking about how to do more informal running records, sort of on the fly and sort of in your day-to-day formative assessment. And then after that, we're going to go over guided reading to review, so we're at a common understanding of what it is and how we do it. And then finally, we'll have a break where you'll be able to do some self-assessment, looking at the components of balanced literacy. How do you feel as a practitioner about what we've talked about each component? What do you need in professional development to move forward in those components? And then we're going to move from a self-assessment into a team assessment. So the fact that you're sitting with your teams is wonderful, because you're going to be able to come together and kind of determine what are your strengths as a team around balanced literacy, and then what are your needs as a team to move forward. Finally, we're going to set some goals as a team, and that'll be what your work time will be about. I've given you a lot of resources that hopefully will get you start thinking about what you already do and how to structure it for this upcoming school year. Okay, so I'd like to walk you through the binder real quick before we get started, so that we're organized and we have a sense of where we're going. Inside the binder, you'll see the cover page that has the documents in order of how they are, and that's really the order of how I'm going to be running through things with you this morning. There's a couple things that you need to insert in there, and one of them, may I borrow yours? Sure. Thank you, is a completed running record form on your table that says Olivia. We're going to be working with this later. If you want to keep it out on your table, that's fine, because we're going to be talking about this when we talk about running records. But you can just put it to the side for now. Great. And the other piece is a guided reading structure, sort of lesson structure form. And this you can just also keep out for now, because we'll be talking about this later. But if you could just kind of put them to the side. We're going to be starting with balanced literacy. Stacy and Debbie have provided you with tabs, and what they've kind of envisioned is using this binder as like a living, breathing resource as you work together this year. And so the tabs are for you. You may decide to make one about running records. You may decide to make one about guided reading, because those are the two big things that we're talking about today. You may decide to make one for resources, because there's a bunch of resources at the end of your binder that I've included for you today. But really, if you can just kind of keep that in mind to maybe look at later, kind of table that, how you might organize it for now. Because it's really going to be your binder. It's going to be what makes sense for you, what makes sense for your team as we move forward.
And we can talk about that a little bit right at break, just to help everybody get organized.
Okay, great.
And there's box tops label on the inside.
Yes. Oh.
So don't throw them out.
Thanks for the tip.
Does anybody need the guided reading lesson?
Give the box. Okay. Okay, I borrow yours. Oh, thank you. So what I suggest is just keeping this open as we move through it together. I've given you a plethora of resources. I'm all about over preparing, and as teachers we always have to do that, right? So we may not get to talk about everything in depth, but the idea is to just give you a lot of things that we're going to be talking about, so that you can go back later and use them more at your discretion. So I'd keep this out in front of you. You'll see our documents. This is kind of our agenda and kind of what we're going to be doing together. The PowerPoint comes next, and so I'll be going through that with you right away here. Feel free to make it your own, make notes. And then I'll be going through these documents throughout our time together. Okay, so it should go in order, and hopefully it'll be easy to follow. Thank you so much. Okay, so starting out with balanced literacy. When we talk about balanced literacy, these are the key principles that we want to keep in mind. Okay, we want to have a shared language in the classroom. In other words, what kind of instructional language and academic language do we use with our students? And then we also want to have shared literacy experiences. And that comes in all shapes and sizes, in one-on-one work with students, in small group, in whole group, book clubs, literature circles, all sorts of ways to have shared literacy experiences. A big piece of balanced literacy too is that individualization, that personalization of learning. That's really huge. We need to know our learners, each one of them, what are their strengths and what are their needs, and what do we need to do to move them forward. And then along with that is really the accountability piece. How do we document it? How do we drive the instruction in a formative way and summative? Another key principle is that mutual respect and safe environment. So we're talking about inclusion. We're talking about honoring every student for what they bring to us. And we know that's important in what we do every day in every content area. Really, the fourth one is my favorite piece of balanced literacy, and that's why I love literacy, is because I get to share with students and teachers why I love reading. Because really the goal of teaching reading is obviously skills and strategies, but above that, an overarching desire to love reading and to love learning, right? Think about why we read as adults and what we want to prepare our students to do in life and in the world. So that's a big piece of balanced literacy. And the last one is integrating opportunities to read, write, listen, and speak, and think all the time. So interaction and really getting kids to talk about their writing and or talk about their reading and write about their writing. And we'll talk about all those pieces here. And so maybe thinking in your mind about ways that you already incorporate a lot of these principles in your instruction, and maybe some ways that you could maybe do some of these more intentionally. Can everybody see okay? Is it a little, okay, great. So when we talk about reading, these three pieces right here is what we bring. The reader brings a lot to the table. The reader brings our prior experience, our knowledge of language, and then also our knowledge of the world, okay? And those are things that differ from student to student. If you're sitting at your table here, your background experience is different from the person next to you, right? And so what you bring to each text really differs. And so when you think about the students in your room, each student differs in what they bring to each text. And we know that reading is thinking. What the most current research has told us is that reading is definitely the 5 big pieces, right? Phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, comprehension, and vocabulary. But comprehension is really what drives the whole show. Comprehension is the meat of reading. If we don't understand what we're reading, you know, we're not really deriving much from it. We need everything to come together so that we can take a personal, make a personal connection with the text that we have, okay? And to exemplify that for you, I wanted to share with you some books from my book diet, because I like to read a lot of different kinds of things. And I want to share with you too, Linda Dorn is a teacher educator and a teacher, reading recovery teacher. She talks a lot about the most current research in brain research and comprehension. And she talks about how each reader has a relationship with each text. And I like that idea because I think that kind of exemplifies how personalized reading instruction is. So here's my personal book diet. Okay, I've got Nefertiti. I love historical fiction. It's one of my favorite genres. And I have a personal connection with this book because not just do I like ancient cultures, but the storyline is about 2 sisters. And I have 2 sisters myself. And so I made a lot of kind of almost like emotional kind of connections as I was reading through the plot and learning about the characters. And so that's one relationship that I have with one book. Another one is nonfiction. I love learning about new things, and I love learning about the brain. Has anybody heard of this book, Female Brain? Well, it came out a couple years ago, and it's fascinating. It talks about our developmental stages as those of us that are women. Sorry, the only one.
That's okay.
You might want to read it, though. It's really good. I recommend it to anyone. I just found it fascinating because I love learning about science and you know, kind of how my brain has developed and you know, chemical things and all these things that affect us as women. And so This is something that I have a personal relationship with.
Who's the author?
The author is Luann Rezendine. And I'll leave it out here if you want to take a look at it. And just something to note too, in this one, it's fiction. I don't really text code at all. I don't really highlight or anything. But in this one, I have a different relationship. I was flagging pages and highlighting and writing notes. You know, I get really excited about nonfiction and I have to like own it, you know, and tear it up and code it like that. Another book that I had a relationship with, as a comprehension relationship with, is a book. It's called A Coleccionista de Momentos, and it's in Spanish. And Spanish is my second language. And so this book, I have an entirely different connection to than those other two. So my knowledge of language is what I'm depending on most here, because I don't know Spanish as well as I know English. So, you know, just thinking about how each book differs with each reader and what we bring to the table really affects us. And the reason I bring that up is because I really want you to think about your readers in your classroom and the readers that you're preparing for this fall, and how you can set up an environment of a love of literacy and encourage them to explore their own kind of relationships with their texts and expose them to a wide variety of texts. We're going to talk about the Common Core standards in a minute, and that is really all about bringing them up to higher levels of text. So exposing them to a different kinds of books for their book diet can be really, really useful for promoting that deeper comprehension. This is the first handout after your PowerPoint. It's in a different format in your binder, but it's basically ways that Fountas and Pinnell has talked about and kind of captured this idea of what is comprehension. When we talk about, if reading's all about meaning, it's all about comprehension. They talk about the systems of strategic action. And if I may, here's just an example again. This is how it looks in your binder. So it doesn't look like it does on there. It's actually a note-taking page, so you could use this with your students as you observe their reading behaviors. But when you get this text, you'll see it right here in the front in the same format. Okay. And so what Fountas and Pinnell have done is they've taken what we know about reading and they've captured it in these systems of strategic action. That's how they talk about comprehension. Okay. And all the things on the top here, all the things on the top are all about how we sustain comprehension. It has to do with using visual cues, phonemic awareness, phonics, rereading, self-correcting, all those things that maybe are a little more surface level, fluency, summarizing, adjusting your rate, and things like that. Those are all the things that help us sustain comprehension, just to get through the book. That's kind of where I am here. I'm kind of at that level with this book, okay? Because it's a little more difficult for me, for a lot of reasons. The bottom part, if you look at these pieces of comprehension, these are definitely more about expanding our meaning of text. So that's when we get into that deeper comprehension, that connection with the text, making that personal meaning with it. And you can see those strategies are a lot more higher order thinking, right? Predicting, analyzing, inferring, synthesizing. Those are what happens when we're in that real flow with the text and we really have that deeper comprehension with it. And so what I did is I gave you the sheet for your binder to start thinking about how you can maybe observe this with your students, because a big part of balanced literacy is observing what they're already doing and talking with them about that. And we'll talk a little bit more about documentation later. One of the things that Fountas and Pinnell says, and that is also based on the work of Mari Clay, who was pivotal in the field of reading with reading recovery, is that these are things that happen invisibly. The things here, a lot of the things that students are doing, they happen within the reader. We can't see them. When you think about that, you can't see what's happening in the brain. So we have to find ways of accessing how they know what they know. Do you see what I mean? It's invisible. What they say on page 32 of the book you're going to get is that we cannot see the mental acts of processing, but we can infer them by closely observing our students' behaviors and the teaching, writing, and drawing that they do as they act on the meaning they derive from their reading. So again, it's all about meaning, and it's all about how they see themselves as a reader and how we can work with each one as a reader. I just wanted to present that to you as sort of the background behind balanced literacy and how it's all about meaning making with our students. Okay? When we talk about balanced literacy, what it looks like in the classroom, there's 3 main components. There's the whole group, the small group, and then the one-on-one. Okay? And as I go through this, I'll go through each of these components. What I think I'm going to have you do is pull out in your binder. It's called the self-assessment, and if we can look at the cover sheet real quick. Thank you so much. It's going to be almost at the end, and I'll show you what it looks like. It's before all the frameworks. It's called self-assessment. And it kind of looks like the slide that we have up top. So I have to flip this around. Okay. So it's about halfway through. There's actually 2 pages you can pull out. This is the self-assessment. Do you see it? It has the boxes like the one on the slide. Yeah, that's the one. You can pull it out or tab it, whatever you want to do. This is what we're going to make time for you to do later, to think about where are you with each of these components, rating yourself. If you want to pull it out now and make notes on it as I go through each component, feel free. It's just something to think about that we're going to be doing later. And then the second one is the reflection and goal setting that you'll be doing with your team later around these components. Okay. You can tab it or pull it out so that you can think about what do you already do as an educator with these literacy components. What might you want to learn more about? That's what we're going to be kind of thinking around here. So thank you so much. It's really up to you, but what I might do is keep that self-assessment handy so I can think, yeah, I already do a lot of whole group read alouds. I'm really comfortable with this component. You know, and you can kind of rate yourself, but you might say, I'm not as comfortable with this other component that Sarah's talking about, so I'm going to make a note about that. Okay? Is everybody with me here? Okay, great. Okay, so with whole group teaching, these are the main pieces, small group and individual. I'm going to go through each of these in a little more detail. But balanced literacy, when we talk about what is balanced literacy, it's really a balance and a response to the whole language versus phonics debate. For those of us that have been in the field and remember, or have learned about the history of reading and the tug of war between, we have to teach phonics and we have to teach whole language. Well, really, we know that we need both, and we need even more than that too. We need to have an environment where students are getting exposed to all different levels of text. They're getting the opportunity for direct teaching, and for independent learning, and for group learning. And so balanced literacy brings it all together with this framework around that idea of a balanced structure. And it's based on the field of Mari Clay, as I mentioned, Fountas and Pinnell, P. David Pearson, Ellen Keene, Mosaic of Thought, lots of other people in the field that have worked on this. And those of us, we know that scaffolded learning is the way to go. So balanced literacy focuses on this idea of the gradual release of responsibility model. And it has all these components in it. It has modeled reading, shared reading, guided reading, independent reading. And there's opportunities to give, some students might need more support, some students might need less support. So what's great about all the components of balanced literacy is that it allows for you to kind of figure out, okay, what does each student need and provide the right kind of support. Okay. Whole group teaching. So this is where we come together. You can see the teacher here in this slide. She's got her students on a rug. Some teachers like to have a big rug, like a gathering space where everybody comes together. Mini lessons happen here where it's usually very brief, like 10 to 15 minute kind of teaching point around one skill or strategy. There can also be shared reading happening. I know definitely more at K4, kindergarten, first grade, you know, a lot of poetry, things like that, around that time together. The mini lesson is a huge piece of guided reading. We have longer whole group lessons, like for example, a read aloud might be 30 to 45 minutes. I mean, that's a long time, but depending on the age of the students, you could have a longer lesson, but we're not talking about that so much. We're talking about your mini lessons that are short, concise, to the point, and then giving students that time to practice. Okay, the book that you're going to be getting is chock full of ideas for mini lessons. If you just want to jot down that mini lessons are all in chapter 23. So it gives ideas for all grade levels around what a mini lesson could look like, what kind of practice opportunities should students be getting after a mini lesson. What we do know about learning is that we need to explicitly teach something and then have students practice it right away. Do you see that? So if we have a short mini lesson and then we have students practice it, they're more likely to learn it. And I'm not doing that with you today. I'm doing a lot of like sit and get, right? I'm not doing a mini lesson. I'm doing like lecturing. So that's very different from what I'm talking about here. There's also chapters in your book about read alouds. And I've also included some lists for each grade level for suggestions for read alouds if you wanted to work on that later as far as how to structure your year. But read alouds are so powerful because that's when you do that direct teaching. You do think alouds. You do noticing, you know, those comprehension strategies that are within the reader. How do we teach those to kids? Well, you model a lot. That's a lot of that happens in the whole group setting, either in a mini lesson or in a longer read aloud. Okay. With small group teaching, this is where a lot of direct teaching occurs based on student needs. And this can take the form of guided reading, which we know as primary teachers, that's a huge part of helping students at their individual instructional level. We can also incorporate book clubs. And it's generally recommended that we start these at second grade. But depending on your learners, you may have students that need more of a challenge and can handle book clubs. Those are more independently run, student-run clubs. There's a lot in the book about that too. Chapters 18 through 20 are all about book clubs, if you're interested in learning more about that. We're going to talk about guided reading in a little while, but there's 3 chapters about it in the book. And we know guided reading is a huge thing, right? It's a lot, and there's a lot we can do with guided reading. So there is quite a bit in that resource, and I'm sure you have resources that you use as well. The centers piece, which I think is really great, especially for K1 and 2 and K4, K1 and 2. I understand that you'll be getting a copy of this per grade level, and some of you might have seen this already. You have this? Okay, great. Do you like it?
Yes.
You do? Okay, and you're doing centers.
Well, we used it one year, but now we do the Daily 5.
You do?
And we love it.
Daily 5. And that's a great resource to draw from too, because it's just one other way to structure it. So that's, for those of you that don't know, the Daily 5 is the sisters. They're actually sisters, and they work together helping teachers implement literacy. You want to talk real quick about the 5 components? For those of us that don't know them.
We have, I think, kind of. You guys have all heard it.
You've all heard it in here?
We've been writing.
It's
really cool.
They read to self instead of centers. They are in different things where they read to self, they read to a partner, they listen to reading. What am I missing? Word work and writing.
Write about reading, right.
And I'd like to talk with you more about maybe blending the two, getting some of, but it's wonderful to get away from all the
independence.
Well, to go toward the independence.
The more scaffolded independent.
Let me talk.
Yes, and that is just one way. So there isn't just one right way to do balanced literacy. That's the thing that can be overwhelming for teachers. It's like, wait, I've got the cafe book, I've got the Daily 5, I've got the, what do I do? Well, pick one that works for you or synthesize. Take pieces from that. I mean, that's what Debbie and Stacy and I talked a lot about in preparing for you today is giving you a lot of options and saying, okay, these are the principles we agree upon. These are the components we agree upon. Now, how might it look in your classroom? You know, so there's the commonality of what the kids are doing and what we expect from the students, and what we know about reading and how we teach and foster a love of reading and skills and strategies in reading. But it might not look exactly the same in every classroom, and that's okay.
Well, and we went totally that way, so now I'm seeing an opportunity to bring in, you know, so once you experience a certain way and then you take what you liked from the past, but what I noticed is it's so getting away from worksheets. And, you know, having a folder full of stuff they've done at a center that is busy work. And they were so engaged in reading. It was amazing. Even the ones like in the beginning of the year that I thought would never
be independent.
And I'd look over and by the end of the year, they were writing the book, so it's cool.
Thank you so much for sharing that. The independent piece, the individualized teaching, the work time, if you will, is the best part of workshop. And I'm going to echo what you said, because I've worked in all classrooms from starting to middle school, but mostly K-5. And the kids that you think might not be able to sit and sustain reading and develop stamina, they do. I mean, we have to teach them explicitly and give them time and practice so they build up maybe 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. But I've worked in kindergarten classrooms where kids are reading independently for over 25 minutes.
Did they start with just the daily one?
Yeah.
Like, it was just the daily one, right?
Yeah. Yes, and thank you for saying that, because launching is a term that people use when they implement balanced literacy or workshop or however you want to call it. Launching is the key, and I'm going to give you some resources on that later. It's all about how you set it up. You know how you set up your classroom community in the beginning of the year and your procedures of what to do if you need a sharpened pencil and all those things that help our classroom run smoothly? It's the same thing in balanced literacy. You have to be explicit about teaching how to sit and read, how to sit with your partner. What does it look like? What does it sound like? What do you do when you have a question and Ms. Ottow's working with a group? You know, it's all these things that you have to think around. But it's a beautiful thing because it actually works. And students want to be independent. They want to be in charge of their own learning. They want to read on their own. They want to write on their own. And there's ways to build in that support so it's not just you they're coming to, and they're becoming more autonomous.
And it's hard to give up that control, though. It's very scary.
It is. And going back to this, that's what it's about. The student-centered learning, balanced literacy is kind of like balancing, like on a tightrope. Like, okay, how do I pick the best components, and how does it look for me in my classroom and for my students this year? I know I have a new student, so I got to think about this. It's not easy and it's complex. But the more we can think about empowering students, the more they will be empowered, and the more likely they are to take charge of their reading and take charge of their literate life, if you will. Yeah, it's not a simple thing, but again, with the right support, you have your professional learning communities. You're able to have some time to plan and think together around how you want it to look. There's a lot of resources out there, so really, I think it can work with the right intentions. With the individual teaching, this work time is what you can call it too. This is when you might have a 5-block going, or 1 block, or whatever might work for your classroom or centers. So you're freed up as the most qualified person in the room to work with the kids. You're freed up to do one-on-one, sit with kids and take notes while they're reading and ask them how their reading's going. You're freed up to pull a group of students with a similar need that maybe need to work on fluency, and you can pull them together and do a strategy group. You're freed up to sit and do a guided reading lesson with the group. You're freed up to walk around and just kid watch and kind of say, all right, this is good. I'm noticing that we're reading for 12 minutes already. That's amazing. Let's chart it. Let's celebrate that. You're freed up to do all sorts of things. So it's, again, like the control has shifted to the kids, and they're able to be in charge of their learning to a degree. You work on that. You're able to bring them back in if you need to. I know a lot of teachers that during this work time, they'll be like, well, it's not working. We need to come back. Let's come back to the rug. Let's have a little mini lesson. I noticed that a couple kids were making the right choices, And I noticed a couple kids weren't, so let's talk about that. What are the right choices again? Oh, that's right, we have these expectations that we set. There's a lot with that launching piece around setting those expectations and practicing them with students. Going back to the whole group real quick, one big part of it is anchor charts, and I wanted to model that for you today. It's just our agenda to kind of keep us anchored on what we're doing. If you're interested in anchor charts, I strongly recommend that you look into it. All the folks that are really all about balanced literacy talk about co-constructing anchor charts with your kids. So you can be teaching how to sit independent, how to sit while you read independently, while you're launching your year, and you could make a chart about that. How you sit while you read independently. You know, you're crisscross applesauce, you're sitting in your own personal spot, you have your book bag, you have your books. You don't need to go to the library, the classroom library that day because you already went, because we do that on Mondays or whatever it is. You know, you're practicing that so that when they don't know what to do, you've got your anchor chart. And that's exactly what it is. It's an anchor to ground their thinking. And that can be around procedures. That can also be around, as you get through the year, the skills and strategies that you're teaching. So for example, if you're teaching text-to-self connections, then you've got an anchor chart about that you've worked on with the kids, that you've made with the students. And it's up there, so then when they're saying, oh yeah, what's a connection? Oh yeah, that's right, we made this chart together. And then it's there for you to use. So that is a big piece of making that work time work well, is how you structure it and how you set it up for, how you set the students up for success. But yeah, I mean, it's great. Once you structure it that way, you're able to get up and assess and get up and move around and do things so that you're not the center of everything. You know, it falls apart if you need to do something. And what's more is that students really take charge of their learning. So that's a huge piece of that balanced literacy. I did mention the classroom library. This is an element of balanced literacy that really should be in place in order for students to work on their book diet. So the classroom library is different than when I was in school. When I was in school, the library in the classroom was kind of like this, which is fine. But you know, you have to pull books out, and what we want to promote is more like book baskets. Have you seen that? And some of you might already have that in your classroom, right? So it's more like genre-based buckets and whatnot. So like animals, science, anything that you might have around genres. You can also do it by interest, so you can have the kids, you know, if they're interested in certain things, you could have them create a book basket. Something that I've seen teachers do when they have limited resources, this is within their grade level, is switch book baskets. I've got this author, I've got Patricia Polacco. Do you have Roald Dahl? I want to do that for Read Alouds. Let's switch, you know, and then we can share our books. So you can really capitalize on what books you might already have. A big piece of the classroom library is having students have their own book bag or book basket or whatever kind of container you might want to use, because then when they have their individual reading time, they take it and they sit, hopefully in a self-selected place, if they're able to do that. They're able to sit with their book bag and read independently. Also, what can be built in that book basket is a reader's response. So a notebook, depending on how you want to structure it. Again, there's no one right way here, but that responding to reading is really huge. Because if we can't see what's going on inside their heads, if it's invisible, one way of assessing that is having them write or draw, early childhood, kindergarten, draw about their reading. Some teachers build that in every day. Say, okay class, everybody take out their journal, write about what you read, or draw about what you read, or whatever it is that you want them to do. At the upper grades, even first and second, I've seen some teachers work with students to have them do that on their own time. So while they're sitting and reading, they also need to write something. So they might read, write, and then read again. So it's just kind of thinking around all those structures of what would work for you. Multiple copies of leveled text. I know I talked with Stacy about this, and it might kind of differ per grade level, but making sure that we have guided reading texts available so that when you do determine students' reading levels with the running records, you can say, okay, these 3 kids are all at a level F. I need to get some level F books, and I'm going to do some guided reading with those students on that level. Right? So that is a big piece of making sure that you can deliver that instructional level that instructional level teaching at that guided reading level. I did mention the notebooks, so the reader's response. You brought up worksheets before, and I'm glad that you did, because it is kind of like we're moving away from like sit and everybody do worksheets. I have seen teachers use worksheet type things for the reader's response, especially at the younger grades. Like they may have a graphic organizer. This book has a lot on the DVD. The DVD in this book is awesome. It has tons of stuff. They may have a graphic organizer, like a story map, right? Like the title, character settings, problem solution, and that's their reader's response. So yeah, it's a worksheet, but it's not. It's a graphic organizer. It's a tool to guide their thinking. So it's kind of thinking about shifting away from fill it in to do like maybe a rote skill, which might have its place, but shifting away from that more to when they're on their own and they're responding, how might they use a reader's response as a tool so we can see what's going on with their thinking. Yes?
That book you showed us, the centers, differentiated centers?
Yes.
Great.
Thank you. Yeah, this one, you're right. This has a ton of stuff. So if they're doing like word making or all sorts of things, putting things into categories, has a lot of helpful ideas for that. Going back to that ownership piece, thing that I've seen be useful when you're kicking this off is having even like learning contracts. Today, during reading, I'm going to read by myself, check. I'm going to read with my friends, check. I'm going to write my reader's response, check. Some way to organize it so that they know what they're expected to do, like a learning contract or something like that. That can be very useful too. More for the intermediate teachers, but I wanted to include you in it, is a couple more resources for this independent work time. After the PowerPoint, you'll see that strategic actions one, if I may, and then today in book club, this is an example of maybe one of those contracts or accountability documents that you can have. And this is what might be on an anchor chart too when you're teaching book clubs. It's, let's see, yeah, it's right after that, strategic actions. Expectations for what they do when they're working together. And what's great about group work is that we're teaching them 21st century skills, right, of how to relate to each other, how to solve problems, how to advocate for themselves, all these kinds of things. After that, you'll see a tool that says evaluating the quality of the classroom library. This has been helpful in working with teachers, in my experience, when they're like, I don't even know what I have in my classroom library. Where do I start? How do I organize it? This can be useful. This can be like bins that you could make, right? Like picture books, short stories, poetry, different ways to organize what you might have. And then that can help determine the needs of what you might not have yet. And then after that is a reading interview. We talked about getting to know our students. This is huge. I don't know what kind of things you do to get to know your students in the beginning of the year. I'm sure you have a million beautiful ideas in this room. But if you can do one thing that maybe you haven't done is the reading interview. Maybe make up your own. Do you read at home? Who do you read with? Do you have books? Those kinds of things can really help you understand who they are as a reader. And you might be able to see some trends and patterns in your student population and kind of see what the needs are. Also what their interests are. What do they like to read about? And then if you're purchasing new books for your classroom library, you're borrowing books from the library here, if they love dinosaurs, and you're not even studying dinosaurs in that grade level, but you may need to get some dinosaur books in your classroom so the kids will be really excited about reading. So the reading interview could be a great place to start that first week of school. You could even send it home and have parents do it with kids. There's a lot of ways just to think about that. I mentioned the launching. That is really, really huge. And again, I'll give you some time later to look at the resources for that. But it's all about sustaining and expanding the procedures. So when you see that kids are abandoning books, because the sisters talk about that a lot in their work, they're just like, they pick out all these great books, but they never finish any of them, right? Well, then let's have a mini lesson about that. I've noticed that a lot of kids are not finishing their books, and we call that abandoning books. Why might you abandon a book? Is that okay? Is that not okay? You know, it's giving those teachable moments the time and space so that kids can see that adults don't always finish books. Sometimes we might abandon books, and that's okay to talk about. But how to talk about getting them to own their reading, getting them to think about if they're always abandoning books, that's probably not a good idea, and how can we find the books that better suit them. Something that we talk about in my district is just right books. So when kids are at the library and they're picking out books for their book bag or their book basket, we want them to be just right. Does anybody use that term in here? Yeah. So I've heard the Goldilocks method too, like it's not too hard, it's not too easy, but it's just right. I've heard the 5-finger method. If there's 5 fingers, if you're reading a page and there's 5 words that are too hard, that's not a just right book. But teaching them to pick out books that are just right for them, so that during that reading time they're actually reading and they're actually wanting to read. Okay, so those are all part of that launching. They're all part of setting up a community of readers. Well, how do you assess while this was going on? It's not an easy thing. I mean, I'm really going to be honest with you about that. It's complex. But it's all about setting up a system that works for you. What works for you, for your aide, you as a teacher might not be the same as the person next door. I know teachers that walk around with a binder, and they have notes. They have a page for each of their students, and they just write down anecdotal notes. You know, they sit down next to the kids and they do a little conferring, a little conference. I know teachers that love to make up their own forms. They're all about, you know, the graphic organizers, and that's how they do it. And they have checklists, and there's a multitude of ways. There's an infinite amount of ways of documenting what you do with students. Okay, and again, there isn't one right way, but the point is, how do you do it, and what kind of impact does it have on your students' learning? It's about formative instruction. So the running records is the summative, right? How do we know what reading level they're at? But the formative is what happens every day, and that's just as important. And running records can also be formative. And we'll talk about that a little bit too. This is a handout in your binder. It should be right in the beginning there, right near those documents we just looked at. And it's about assessing. And it's a lot. I mean, like I said, there's a multitude of ways that you could set up your assessments for your classroom. The formative assessment piece, the day-to-day. I've worked with teachers, myself included, who say, it's all up here. I know who my students are. It's all in my head, right? You know a lot about your students, and you keep a lot of it in your head. And that's great, but when it comes time to produce, are we finding it?
No.
We're not finding it. Just a second.
Here's assessment on form.
Yeah. Okay. If you're not finding it, I'll get it for you. So I'm positive you can't see this very well, but we'll get it for you. Teachers who say it's all in my head, that's good, but we need to be able to show what it is they're doing. So the documentation piece, I know it's a lot. If you've been running around thinking about your students and it's all in your head, and then you have to start writing it down, it's a big shift. So I would just recommend starting with maybe one note-taking sheet, like maybe watching kids one day, just kid watching. And then you can move into more complex note-taking of what's happening during guided reading, what's happening during sharing time or mini lessons, or however you might want to set up your observational notes. But there's the, when kids are talking about text, you can take notes. When kids are reading, you can sit down next to them in a guided reading or one-on-one and take notes. That writing about reading that we talked about, that reader's response, is a huge way to assess. And I realize with kids that are acquiring literacy at primary levels, that can be difficult because their oral language is often much higher. But then just sit and listen to them. You can have them tell you about what they're reading. And then you can also have them write about it too. Those are ways to assess. Okay? And then with the more formal assessments, that's going to be your running records, your benchmarks, maybe prompt writing, whatever kinds of classroom-based assessments that you have to do. Okay. I know this has been a ton of information. So what I want to do is just give you a couple minutes to just turn and talk and just kind of digest where we are right now. And maybe just kind of thinking around the components that I presented. Just kind of what feels right, what feels new, and we'll just come together
in a couple of minutes.
She gave us that. Do you need it?
Oh, no, I took it out of the
No, I got it.
I took that out.
Okay. I realize it's a lot, it may be a lot to process, and you may have tons of ideas flying through your head right now, which is great. We will have time for you to synthesize more of this and prioritize as a team what you want to do. I'd like to share with you very quickly before we look at the Common Core standards. What does this mean for writing? Some people have writer's workshop or a writer's program. The writer's piece can be really similar. So if you're thinking that you want to try this or that you already do this, this is what it would look like. In writing, you would have the whole group too. Maybe a mini lesson or some kind of shared writing experience. And then you can also have that small group or work time where kids are working on their own writing. And then that individual time is really big too. So it can work in both. It can work in reading and writing. We're not going to focus on this today, but I just wanted to share this with you.
Do you have a good resource for that?
For writing, I love Lucy Calkin's work. She's really popular with the units of study. The units of study, and I haven't really talked with your folks about that yet, but you know, by all means, if you're interested in that. And
if you have time later, can we talk to you about this? Because we have that, and we try to use it, and it's like, it's about like too slow.
Really? Yeah, and I mean, again, I think if I can share anything with you that you take with you today, is that what we know about reading, what we know about writing, what we know about literacy is that we don't necessarily want to rely on a program or a book. We want to use it as a resource. We're in charge. We're the teacher. We need to know literacy so that we can be responsive to the kids' needs. So it's, again, that balance of like using resources and all that's out there, but not relying on it totally. Does that make sense? I really feel like it's about people, not programs. So the programs and the resources are there to help us, but really it's all about us and knowing what we're teaching. Having that comfort with reading instruction, having that comfort with writing instruction. Does that make sense? I love that. Great. It's about people.
We're so glad you're glad.
Okay. Now, let's look at the Common Core standards. You have the Common Core standards in the very back of your binder. It's a bunch of pages. If you could please pull those out so you can have them to look at, that would be great. They're in a horizontal format, and I want to say there's about 20 pages or so. You can just pull out the whole packet. It's not stapled, it's just in there. You can just yank it out, and then we'll have that to look at. This is what it looks like. Or you just keep it in your binder, whatever is comfortable for you, but this is what we're going to look at right now. Okay. is a leader in the field of standards-based education. How many of you knew that? We were one of the first states to have math standards. We've been really pivotal in the field of reading and other areas for standards. The Common Core Standards is wonderful, in my opinion, because it's all the states, well, 48, coming together with the same standards. Hallelujah, right? Across the nation, now we can all be teaching to the same expectations. State to state. Not this state has this level that they expect their students to learn, and this state has this level. No, we're all coming together in a cohesive, systematic manner in teaching students what they need to know for work and college. That's the Common Core Standards. They were adopted by the state last year, and this is the year when districts get to kind of play around with them and see, okay, what are these? What do these mean? How do we fit this into our instruction? How do we fit this into our assessment? We know that WKCE will be changing eventually, and they'll be adopting these Common Core Standards as part of it. Okay, so this is a really good year for us to look at them, and I think it's really great too as you're looking at how to fuse balanced literacy into your instruction. Bringing in that Common Core is going to be great because it means you're ahead of the game. Okay, districts are really just starting to look at them like we are today, and they're really based on research and, like I said, college and work expectations. Not all of these slides are in your handout, by the way. I didn't want to give you too much. But what I'd really like for you to do is just have the standards in front of you so you can kind of get to know them as I walk you through them. And like I said, every state previously had their own standards. Now we're coming together, and we're looking at kind of through a global lens. What do kids need to know to compete with other students in the world? So the core standards are more rigorous than what we've seen in the past. And they fuse really well with the response to intervention model, which is about including all students and having the same expectations for all teachers. So it really unifies us. Today we're just going to look at the reading standards, which are in the English Language Arts Standards. That's what you have in front of you. I'd like for you to look up here real quick and just kind of read to yourself what these standards are all about. As you're reading, think about how does this mesh with our idea of balanced literacy and those key principles that we talked about earlier. Demonstrate independence. Now, what we talked about, helping kids be more autonomous as readers, that's a part of the Common Core Standards. That content knowledge, varying demands of audience, task. We talk about comprehension. We know that comprehension is the key of reading. So now we want them to critique. That's the core is asking them to critique different types of texts and value evidence. So I have this relationship with this text, and this is why. So looking at that evidence piece of reading. And then moving into using more technology. As you think about if you're doing centers, things like that, you can bring technology into that way. And then really value other cultures and perspectives, and we can do that through reading. We can do that through different kinds of multicultural literature and discussion. So let's dig into them real quick. There's 4 strands.
Please come to the office.
There's 4 strands of the English language arts. Today we're just going to look at the reading. But there's also writing, and there's speaking and listening. This is kind of new. And then there's also language. So what we've given you today is the reading. And we'd like for you to pull it out. We're going to look at literature and informational texts. Okay, so if you flip through, you're going to see that it says literature at the top of the page. It's on page 11. Everybody can find page 11. Great. And it says reading standards for literature K-5. Thank you. And this page just has K1 too, so this is just for us. What's I think really useful about this document is it doesn't just break it up by your grade level, so you're siloed into one grade. You, as say a first grade teacher, you can look at this and say, okay, what are kindergartners expected to know? and then what are second graders expected to know. So it shows you that continuum within that standard. Just take a moment and kind of read through your grade level on that page. And then if you can turn to the next page, you'll see that same grid, but for informational text. So you were just looking at literature, so fiction. Now take a look at the nonfiction component, the informational text. This is what's new for Wisconsin, specifically, is more emphasis on informational text. Nonfiction for all students, K-5, K-12 actually. With the Common Core standards and informational text, at the bottom of the page, that last strand, you'll see range of reading and level of text complexity. There's actually like a staircase, K-5, of text complexity. When you think about what kind of text you want to read aloud to your students, when you think about what kind of text you want to have in your classroom, you want to keep this in mind, because we want to we don't want to water things down, right? We want to expose kids to higher level text complexity, linguistic structure, syntax, and speech. You know what I'm talking about, right? It's really important that all kids get exposure to higher level, that we're always thinking about pushing them higher. And I've got some resources for you, again, of some read alouds that are appropriate for grade levels that I think align really well with the Common Core. Okay. So that is a really big piece, is that push on informational texts. I'm not going to go in much deeper than that for now, because this is just a quick overview. As you work together this year, you can maybe think about how to integrate these standards more into your practice. But that's really for the fiction and nonfiction. The other part of reading is the foundational skills. And this is huge for K2, right? We need to focus on phonemic awareness, phonics. Those are really big pieces of the reading puzzle at your grade levels. And that is also a page in there. So if you flip through after the literature and the informational texts, you'll see that foundational skills. I think it's page 15. Okay, and this is how it breaks up. Print concepts, as we know, right? Learning about how books work and basic voice print match, things like that, K1, so phonological awareness. What I like about this too is that it doesn't stop with phonics at primary, it brings it all the way up to 5th grade. So kids are beyond your grade clusters talking about phonics, because we know that's important at every grade level. And same with fluency. So again, that's a lot of information, but it's really just yours as a resource for now, as a starting point. The Common Core website has a lot more information on it. This document also has a lot of information on it. It talks about what does that mean to be career and college ready? Why are these standards so important? Okay, so you can read that at your own pace and your own time. But this is the national website, and then this is where the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction really gets into it. And we're really excited about it in Wisconsin. So you can read about that if you'd like to. But otherwise, that's just a quick kind of overview. Again, just thinking about why is this important? Well, making sure that we're having the appropriate level text for our students, that text complexity piece, and then that we're moving up to higher levels of text complexity. So I guess if there's anything that you can take away right now at this moment, just kind of thinking about different levels of text, and especially in the primary grades. We don't just need to have 1st and 2nd and 3rd grade level text in our classrooms, right? We might have students reading at different levels. And even if we don't, we can still provide access to those reading levels for students at lower reading levels through read alouds and shared readings, things like that. Okay. So, we're going to move on, go over running records real quick. How many of you feel like you're really comfortable with your assessment system, with the Fountains of Canal benchmark assessment system? Yeah? Okay. I'm going to rely on you as, I guess, experts, if you will, because you're using them. Some of us might be new to this, and when I'm not here, and you're ready to start doing this with your students, you can go to each other, right? So knowing that you can build capacity within your community of practice to rely on each other. So if somebody around you raised their hand, that's who your friend's going to be to help you with us later. For our talk about running records today, what I'd like to do is just introduce you to the kit and then practice a little bit. Some of us might not have practiced or might not have experience with this, and some of us definitely have. So we're going to practice a little, and we're going to talk about what does this mean for instruction, and how do I do this? How can I do this every day, not just when I'm doing a running record? So in your benchmark assessment system, you've got this kit, okay? There's two. One is for grades K2, and the other one is for grades 3-8. They do overlap a little. You can see the levels A through N, and then levels L through Z. They do overlap, and the titles are different, in case you're wondering. The titles that overlap are not the same titles. Does everybody know where to find that kit? Those of you that use it. Can somebody talk about that real quick?
Where the kits are?
Yeah, where the kits are.
Yeah. Whoever hoards it.
Whoever hoards it. Thank you.
One of the
I don't know, it's on, Debbie Duncan might have taken it.
She's not here. It's Debbie.
Okay.
No, it's Debbie.
Good to know, right? Because they're recording it. So one per grade level.
And there's another kit in the CMC.
Excellent. So an extra kit in the CMC, one per grade level, so you should have access to it. It's all set up. It's nice. It's got the levels and then the documentation for each running record. Does anybody use the calculator?
Is there a calculator?
Yeah,
I'd like
to
get
one of those. We took it.
You took it?
I've
never seen
They're
that
hoarding the calculator.
I've never seen that. I want one.
Yes, they came with that. Yeah.
They should all come with one. Look around, because each box should have one.
Debbie. Just keep on saying Debbie. Just keep on saying the name Debbie.
That would have come in really handy if they didn't mute it all.
I'm going to tell you that you can use whatever calculator you want, but what's nice, and that's what I did until I realized I didn't have one in my kit either, and I found it, and I realized this is helpful because it's all built in. They do that. They automatically figure the self-corrections out for you, so you don't have to do the formula, which is really nice. And it also has a timer, so if you want to time your kids, that's an optional part of the assessment, but if you want to, there's a timer built into it. So, something to know.
It's really easy to use.
Yeah, who knew?
No one in Taters, but I use that every time I do this. Because then you can figure out the words per minute, like in 10 seconds.
Yeah. Right.
While they're finishing the independent part.
Right.
Yeah. Something else that comes with your kit, so again, look for this, is the continuum of literacy learning. This is the one for the other kit, grades 3-8. This is awesome. I just started using this more with teachers at my school.
Yep.
We do?
Wherever the calculators are, it's probably.
Yeah. I know we're right. Well, I do it in 6th grade.
I love this for many reasons. First of all, it goes through each level, like in level O. What does a reader need to do at a level O? And why is level O different to level P? And an N. And so it's really great when you're getting into the nitty-gritty of what is reading and do I know the levels as a teacher, and really getting you to become more comfortable with what it is that is instructional level text. And then beyond the guided reading levels, it's got a tab for each grade. And then it goes through, remember those 3 pieces of the strategic actions, the within the text, beyond the text, about the text that Fountains of Canal use. So if you're looking for more nitty-gritty behaviors to notice and teach, they're in here for your grade level. So these are great. I've worked with teachers and we use this for like mini lessons and how does this align with the core standards and looking at all the pieces within reading. So this is a great resource for you. But when we talk about assessing, we use the running record form. And we talk about the levels, getting an instructional level for students. We're talking A to Z. That's what Fountas and Pinnell uses. In your binder, I put a correlation chart in there for you. And it should be in the front after the PowerPoint and those other documents that we looked at. It has the A to Z gradient. That's up here. But what I thought might be useful for you is that it also has other systems. Because let's face it, we have books from all over the place. I know my classroom did. I had books that were leveled using a basal equivalent, like primer, pre-primer. I had books that were leveled maybe using reading recovery or just grade level. So this is a nice tool if you're thinking about leveling books. If you care to level books, this can help you with that. Also, the MAP assessment, do you use that all the way through, right? So when you get your MAP assessment results, you'll see a Lexile on there, a Lexile range. And this is more for the intermediate folks, but you might use it. We've looked at this, teachers have looked at, and we've said, okay, there's the Lexile level on the correlation chart. Where do I start with this student? They're so high level, but I want to give them a running record. Maybe their Lexile is a 550, so I'm going to start them right around a third grade reading level, which means Fountas and Pinnell, I'm going to pull out a level N and see how they do. So it kind of gives you a where to start if you're looking at it that way, if you just got Lexiles on students. Okay. There's also a piece in the kit if you want to use word lists. Kids can read word lists, and that can, depending on how they do on that, can just help you decide which level to go towards. Okay, but your primary, you should kind of know where your students are at based on last year's records. Is that correct? More or less, you kind of take last year's. Okay. Oh, yeah.
Debbie, shut me down if this isn't the right time. But we went and re-leveled our books.
No, I'm just totally teasing. Go ahead.
No, because I don't know if this is the proper, but we went and re-leveled our books because we leveled all of our books according to our own system. And everyone knew them very well. And then we changed to the Fountas and Pinnell benchmark.
We were using Rigby.
So then we went back and re-leveled them. And it was, I mean, even like some of the books were like, no way, there is no way this is a G. There's no, this should be a D, and there's no way. And so we were going to put them all back. What is your suggestion? Stay the course and just
we've
get
really
used to it?
struggled with this.
I think this goes back to me. This goes back to you as a teacher, knowing, reading. I use the continuum a lot for things like that. I say, yeah, I really think this is a level G. Well, let's look at what is a level G. And we look at the text features of level G. Well, they have about this amount per page. This doesn't have a G in it, but this has an M. So an M might look like this. It has about this amount of text per page. The complexity of the sentence structure is about like this. Oh, it has some various perspectives revealed through dialogue, so more higher level things. It's just a suggestion for you to kind of use this as a guide when you think at what is the difference between levels. And I would say, you know, as a reading specialist, if you can find evidence to say that it's a G and you want to make that a G, make it a G. You know, if you can really make an argument for it, then own that.
Okay.
I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Debbie.
Well, you know how it is when you get used to something and you've used that book with certain groups.
Right.
You've used a certain teaching point with that book. However, maybe Fountas and Pinnell looked at a different part of it. I don't know. I don't know if the right thing, Anne, I'm talking.
Let me ask you this, Jen and Ann and everyone that's gone through this. Do you think it is just individual titles, or do you think it is the different levels that you guys had identified years back versus what Fountas and Pinnell believes to be true about the levels? Or do you think it's just individual titles? Because if it's just individual titles, I would do what Sarah's saying.
There's some individual titles.
Yeah, it's not real far off. If you go back to what that thing was we created years ago where it has all the, what a text should look like, it's very similar to Fountas and Pinnell. It's just, there were some that were just so far off.
And I think that's what you do, exactly what she said.
I think putting them back where they are, it's not
But
that.
we have to change the labels on it because some people are not. And so then like I grabbed some for tutoring and I'm like, now I've got them at home. I'm like, oh my gosh, I thought I had D's and it says F. And
I know.
Yeah, you do.
There's a lot of.
And who's gonna do that?
What
In
if
their
we
spare
divvy
time?
it up? I was thinking one day.
Because you have to do it.
You gotta
it
do
has
it
to be a
all
system.
together. You have to do it one big.
But if
piece,
someone says
otherwise it's
these
too hard.
need to be changed to D, Robin, okay, you know what I'm
Right.
saying?
But that's what we tried. We tried to put, like, if you have this book and you're using it, change it to D. We have X, F,
Yeah.
crossed out, G,
Because
crossed
there's
out.
Oh, no, I need a new
It's
label.
like,
I would put a
okay.
new label D.
But I think,
Well, it's obviously a task that teachers need, that you can't turn over to the aides because
Right.
you're working with the students and
Right.
you know,
Right.
right? So some of you just have to sit down and commit to it.
What about, that's our thing for the year this year?
It could
Our
be your goal. It could be a big goal.
The label because it's.
Yeah, because it's a huge piece to have a functioning level library, especially at primary when you're teaching literacy acquisition. You've got to have those, like you said, you've got to have them available.
Yeah.
Do you need to have all your books leveled? No, you don't.
Right.
And some teachers like to, but then again, kids, that self-selection point when and that free reading, they don't necessarily want to. You don't necessarily want them walking around saying like, oh, "I'm a level D," you know, and I can only read level
These
D.
are-
You want to be able to access those higher level texts, and you're not talking about
Our classroom libraries are.
John.
Great. Yeah, but I guess I concur with Debbie, like if it's individual, kind of go with evidence-based decision-making on that. If it's a whole like company that you're kind of off, you know, you can do some investigating online too and look at what other people level it as. I do that a lot. I type it in and say, okay, Scholastic says it's this level, and you know, they say it's 4th grade. Well, which level within 4th grade, and kind of make a case for it. So, but yeah, so really knowing those levels is a big part of being an effective reading instructor. And doing running records can be a great way to get to that point. So use this chart if you don't already have one. What I would always do is laminate it and throw it in my kit or throw it in my folder so I'm ready to do running records. I've got it. So I'm aware of where I need to go. With the students, the running record form for each level, we've got an example that we're going to look at, and it's Olivia's. That's here. Thank you so much. So this is what it's going to look like. Okay. And it's blank. This one is not blank, obviously. This is the running record piece where you're coding what they're saying. And then there's also the comprehension conversation. And that is what this looks like up here. I love this part because it's not just comprehension questions. You're kind of like coaching them. You're saying, what?
Can you read the elevator instructor by the elevator?
You're saying, what did you read? What did you think about that? It's a little more open-ended, if I'm something else, than like those of you who might have done Reiki or other systems. That's much more like cut and dry. And again, I like that because it empowers you as a teacher to really know reading and to really know your readers. You do score them on a rubric based on what they say, and there are prompts there. And again, it has those 3 pieces that Fountains and Pinnell thinks about comprehension, that within the text, those obvious things about sustaining reading, and then the beyond and about, which is those deeper levels of comprehension. So it's really looking at those literal and non-literal ways of knowing about a
Well,
text.
how to score that, because I think some of us are all kind of doing a little bit differently on how we're giving like 3s and 2s and 1s and
Yeah.
breaking it up differently.
Can you talk a little bit more about how you're doing it differently? Like what's different about that?
Well, I know Mary Menzel had mentioned that she was confused at what we were putting down on our green cards.
Mhm.
Maybe, I don't know, first, I don't know, I didn't look at it yet, but if we were, some of us were counting each of those questions as
Mhm.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If there was 5 or 4 on one block and then 3 on the next, if we'd ask those questions, or somehow they answer them, we would count a point for each question. Is that how you're supposed to do it?
Any responses on that?
Is it guys kind of, I think they're kind of about it.
Do you want to respond on that, Amy?
I do a little bit different than that. I tried to start doing it that way, but it wasn't making any sense because some of those questions the kids weren't used to the way we were asking it, so they would just bomb it. So what I did is I took it as an overall. I mean, if they missed one tiny little thing, then it wasn't a major thing, then I...
We used to say, okay, now tell me about the story. Can you retell
Right.
what they did? But then if I let them go with that and then I go back and ask them some
It's not
questions
the
after
same.
their head has already gone past that, they can't answer.
Right.
Right.
And my sense always was that what is there is they don't necessarily have to answer all those things. Those are
Right.
prompts for you to get them going, but that's kind of all the little details that as long as they get the holistic, kind of the gist of what's there, then you score at one time. But they don't have to get all the parts.
What about that extra point that's thrown in there?
That,
Oh, yeah.
I always figure that's your, if if they bring it in, like, there's one about glasses, and so they talk about like, oh, so-and-so in our class has glasses, or my brother had to go get his eyes checked. Whenever it had something to do with their life or beyond their, I mean, for
I had
us,
a kid
that's where we
once
were.
independently, that reminded me of that other book we read earlier.
Right.
I did that, because I didn't
Right.
even prompt that.
Right. And again, to kind of restate that idea of a conversation, I'm just going to read to you what it says. If you want to look it up, it's on page 32, tips, some more tips on how to do that. They say it's not a series of continuous questions that are asked one after another. And that's a shift for some of us, because I know I was always used to doing that when I did Jerry John's and other inventories. It's not. It's a conversation, to have a real conversation that is not a steady barrage, but it's a flow of talk back and forth. So those prompts are there to kind of say, tell me more about that. Why do you think that? Then what happens? You know, and getting them to show you their thinking through their talking. And it is more of a holistic. I would agree with you on that. That it's kind of tricky sometimes. And go to your colleagues if you're not sure. You know, have those critical conversations with each other. It's that holistic piece. Where is that student at, based on that rubric? Okay. So there's a lot of resources in your binder around that. After the comprehension, or the correlation chart, you're going to see that assessment at a glance. And if this is new to you, this is another good one to laminate. Okay, what do? I read the title. I tell them the introduction on the sheet. Okay, this is what I have to do. I have to code it. And it gives you kind of an order of doing it. Those of you who are a lot more familiar with this, you've probably internalized this protocol. And you might even have some tips for those of you that are new. But it's a nice kind of thing to have in your hands.
Where is it?
It's going to be right after the correlation chart. It's called Assessment at a Glance, and it has materials to bring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's okay, Stacy, we're a little challenged. Okay, go ahead.
It's been a long summer. We're in school again. What do we do? I know. I understand. Believe me. And it goes through it. So you can see you're going to record the information. You're going to give them the title. The number of words is a big piece because that helps you come up with the number of errors and self-corrections. And then you go through and code it, and we'll talk about that in a minute. You can time them. You don't have to. So that's optional. It's really up to you. And then you look at the number of errors and self-corrections. And then fluency is a part of this too. I really appreciate that because sometimes we might just move a child up a level, but they're reading really choppy, and they don't have good cadence, and they're not really sounding authentic with their oral reading. So fluency is a really big part of this. So really look at that and consider if it's not always appropriate to move a child up a level if their fluency isn't on target. And then that could be a goal for them. That could be what you work with them on. Then that number 10, that conversation about comprehension is a big part. The writing prompt is optional, okay? But again, that shows you more about your readers. If you can do that, I encourage you to do it. What we used to do with the teacher that I did this with the writing or drawing prompts, is just have them do it independently, and then I would start another assessment with another student, and I would just have them, leave them there, or I could talk to them about it later. But it's just more evidence of their thinking. Okay. And then again, it's great for their portfolio. So when you're talking with parents about their students' literacy, you've got another example here, plus their readers' response logs or whatever you're going to do for that writing about reading piece every day. I put this in your binder too. This is something that I just loved from the Write group. Those of you who maybe have done Sunshine in the past, things like that. Okay, so I love this graphic because I'm a visual learner. When I'm coding text, when I'm writing down what they read and then what kind of miscue or error they made, I like to have this near me if I need a reminder of what are the different miscues. Okay, so the three main miscues are meaning, structure, and visual. And it's really about us making inferences. We don't know exactly what's happening in their head, but we're making inferences about why they're making these errors in their reading. Okay, so let's go through Olivia's real quick. I know most of you have familiarity with running records. I don't want to spend too much time on this part. We want to talk more about what do we do after this and how do we do this informally. But you can see on Olivia's running record what she did, how she read it. Now, with the little ones that are reading slower, you can check each of their words. But you know, with kids that are flying through, you don't have to put a check on top of each one. It's recommended that you do to keep your place. But you know, as kids read a lot faster, it's hard. It's like you're worried about checking. And you know, the checking isn't what's important. What's important is coding. So writing down what they said above the word. So for example, Olivia on the 4th line, she said, but it didn't fall out, bless you. But it didn't fall out. Instead of saying, but it did not come out. Okay, so that's 2 errors because she combined the words did not into didn't. And that error, that miscue is using all 3, meaning, structure, and visual. Because maybe she used visual because she saw D and DID, so she was using print information for that. For structure, she was using her knowledge of language. She knows that did not actually, it structurally makes sense to say didn't. And then she was using meaning information because it actually makes sense in that sentence to say it didn't fall out. Fall is a different story. Fall, she was using, the assessor circled meaning and structure. Because meaning makes sense. Your tooth can fall out or it can come out. But she's not using visual cueing there because there's no connection between the F and fall or you know any other print information in those 2 words. So it's not a visual cue. But it could be a structural cue too because it makes sense structurally to say that. In the sentence it makes sense. So again, I use this. It's another one that I'm a big fan of laminating, if you haven't guessed. But I laminate it and I help, just helps me. If I haven't done a running record in a while, I have it next to me and I'm like, what kind of miscue was that? Oh, it sounded right in that sentence, so it could have been a structural. I could make a case for that. I could prove it. If they're just looking at words and letters, if they're just sounding out the beginning of every word, that's definitely visual. You know, or for meaning, if they're looking at the picture or only relying on what they know and not looking at the word or the sentence level. So that's there to help you. We could spend a lot more on this, but we're not because we really want to talk about more of the instructional implications. Okay, what I'd like for you to do is look at Olivia's running record. Okay, I don't have the fluency score for her, but I do have the fluency information in your binder. If you flip to the next page, sorry, it's 2 more pages. Fluency, there's a whole fluency piece in there, 6 dimensions of fluency. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rubrics on one page, and directions of how to use it on the page before it. Imagine Olivia as somewhere in that fluency piece. So like if she wasn't real fluent as a reader, and this was her running record, I'd like for you to think about that and talk about that at your table. Where would you go with this student? What does this mean? Okay, so we know that she's at a level E, but that's only so helpful. What are we going to teach her? What behaviors are we going to notice and support with her? Take a look at her miscues, think about fluency, pretend that you can assess her fluency, and take about 5 minutes and kind of talk about what you would do with this student from this point on.
I think she's making careless mistakes.
Right.
She probably knows better than the number of errors she has made. She's making careless mistakes.
Probably her comprehension is fairly good. When she
Right.
makes mistakes, her comprehension.
Right. So she,
Slow down, maybe when you go back and look at her fluency, she's a fast reader. Yeah, fast reader.
She's in a race.
Is that right, you guys? It really is right.
Yeah. This girl used to know. Yes.
yes, she's not getting her mouth, but it's
Well, no, right down here.
Oh, is it?
Total, and then 7, right, so we really only had 6 people. With the majority of them. Right.
Oh, but 7.
self-corrects, so.
Okay, but I can't go separate.
He self-corrects? Oh, yeah. Right, that's a whole different score, self-correct.
Well, it is, but then you come
See,
back
but
with.
if this were my school, they would have had 26.
You don't call it self-correct. You should. No, I think.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
We did too.
I know, some of the
We're doing that too.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
No, that's not how I do it.
Yeah, but that's what it looks here. Here's, well, maybe that's not correct. 6, 7, 10, 11. 12, 13 mistakes, and then 7 times she
No, then she had
1.
1, 2.
Yeah, it tells you right here.
And then 4.
Does she have all Tracy? I don't have all.
Oh, they're not really connected. 7. Self-correction, which were separate from the errors that she
maybe she's just speaking too fast, and that's what she's.
Self-correct.
Self-correct.
So then there's no longer an error.
So,
See, if I corrects it,
Me neither.
I don't know why
You do?
Yeah, you're supposed to. You're supposed to put in every time that they have an error, you're supposed to technically, any time, like even if they
I count it
do.
self-correct. When a child self-corrects, it's no longer an error.
I mark all the errors and all the self-corrects and subtract it out. Because you have to know what the error was. In order, that's the whole
but I
reason
mark
why
it as a self-correction. I write down what the error was, and then I do this, and I show the self-correction.
And so what does it look like over here then?
Then it's just a tally of the self-correction.
Right.
And you count it as still an error.
No, and a, well, it's one of each. And the self-correct is one of each.
Yeah, we need to come together on that.
Well,
because
that's the way they're doing it here. See, like, for example, she does it only with the self-correct. Now,
Yeah, we need to clarify that. Everybody.
see, now this one is a little.
It doesn't, in the end, you're still going to come up with the same percentage.
True.
Still going to be
Oh,
scored
oh,
the same.
okay. All right.
You're not going to come up with a different.
Right.
Okay, okay. But do we want to be unified in that,
Sure,
or?
but I'm just saying it's not like we've been all.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
What I do is,
Gotcha.
instead of putting this stuff next to,
Yeah, me neither.
when I want to check mark these off, and I just put a check in there. And it was sitting circle it, I just put a check mark in there. But for example, here, I would have, it would look like this. This is what it would look like. It would just have another tally here. And then, that way I
Just
look
the
at these
self-correction.
so that I can go back to here. I'm trained to look at the errors to figure out what the error is. And then, I don't necessarily do that with
Yeah.
See, in my mind, it's always self-correction is no longer an error, so why would I put it in the error column when
No,
I'm
that's-
showing in the self-correction column?
Right, I do both, but that's this stuff.
Yeah, yeah, I see why you're.
It's more, what's more important is what they're doing is self-correct.
Right, so it's a tally mark. Oh, I gotta put a check mark and figure out which
Right,
one's.
let's look at the, policies.
Mine is just.
Yeah, I think we should.
Yeah.
I think we brought up a very.
Yeah, mine is only basic one, mine is I know I have to go up. She doesn't put the errors.
She self-corrects one, they don't count as an error.
Yeah, they don't count any of these in here.
So I don't want to leave this one, and that's how they can
Our numbers are exactly the same. It's just a.
Once they self-correct, just erase. Yeah, that's how I understand it too.
Mine is more for, the reason why I said I always end up putting it in there is when you go back and look at it, I always go and tell it, then I can go back and look to see what's done, right?
And it's one of those things where it's like, I mean, if you were not counting the self-correction, it's a totally other thing, but it's like a minor, individual personalized.
Right.
You're still scoring.
Right. The scores are the same, it's more of my preference of how do I remember which ones I did. No, I think, well, I think it's just, we just figured out it's our own thing.
Okay. Okay, so let's come together over Olivia. There's a lot to talk about here, and I wanted to share with you that The resources on the DVD are awesome. They have, if those of you who might be wanting to train other people to do it or have a refresher on coding, you can listen to Olivia and use the blank one in your binder, and you can score her yourself and see if it matched up. But there's other kids too that you could do on there. There's other forms, blank forms that you could print, and then also completed forms that you could print. And what's coming up that I've heard is how we code it. There's a cheat sheet in your binder that is found in some Pinnell's system, how they use it, and it's based on Marie Clay. You know, they write the word up there, they put an R for repeat. There's all these little shortcuts that you can use when you code the text. What's really important, though, is that you keep track of the errors and the self-corrections. We talked about how in here she doesn't, or whoever scored this, didn't count it as an error and a self-correction. It's just counted as self-correction if they self-correct. Okay, and that's what's recommended to do. But it's...
Counted as an error and a self-correction?
No, that it's just a self-correction because it was an error, but then she self-corrected it, so it changes from an error to a self-correction. But what's really important is this part. I know I've been working with teachers. Just getting to this point is a big step for some of us that may not have reading training, and that's okay. Just coding. Yeah. That's huge. You can just start somewhere. Start with listening and writing down what they're doing. Okay? Then you can go back and do the analyzing later. As you get more proficient at it, you'll be able to do both at the same time. You'll be starting to think through these cues and start to code what's happening over here. But really, this is the meat of what Olivia's doing. Did she self-correct a lot? No. She didn't. No. 7 total and 13 errors that she did not self-correct. So something that you might do with her, and I heard it at a bunch of tables, was she needs to slow down, maybe slow down. We don't know how fast she's reading, but she's got to start self-monitoring. She's got to be able to notice when she's making a mistake, when she's miscuing. But then not just when she's doing it, but why. So we look at that MSV information here. It's huge. When she self-corrects, what does she do? Let's look at where she self-corrects.
Goes back and looks.
Like on page, second page, right?
It's all visual.
She's reading on page 5, she says, but it did not come out. And then she went back and said, fallout. So she went back. First she used meaning and structural information to make that miscue, because in her mind, come makes sense, structurally and meaning-wise, but she went back and used visual. You see that? That last column, she went back. That's the power of the coding. She has that strength. She goes back, she knows how to look at the letters and do voice print match, and then think about meaning and structure and balance the cues. What we want each reader to be able to do is have a balance. I think of it like a 3-legged table. You need to have all 3 cueing systems activated. If you don't, it's not going to work. It's going to fall over. A lot of kids are here, especially the primary, kids acquiring literacy, right? They're like sounding out all the time. Well, we don't need to coach them in that. We don't really need to coach Olivia in sounding things out. She does it already. This is proof. This is evidence. We don't even have to remind her to do it. She does it on her own. We might need to focus here. So looking at the MSV, if you look at the total on the last page, it's nice because it shows you where her strengths are and where her needs are. If you look at the error column, she is so heavy in M and S. She's got 15 each here, so she's got that. But she's not really using it correctly, is she? She's making errors. But so that's our entry point into working with her. We can start coaching her using this language. We can ask her, whoa, stop. Did that make sense? You said this. Does that sound right? Same components, though, at any grade level. So small group teaching, this is what you'll see when you put it in. Well, actually, what you want to do, just a quick tip here, is you want to go to the disk to get at the PDFs, like all the documents. You go to Explore. That was tricky for me. It took me a while to find that. Explore is going to bring all the documents up, like all the graphic organizers and everything else. Okay, resources is where you're going to find that. But if you want to watch the DVD, just pop it in and this should show up. So I'm going to jump into small group teaching and then guided reading. And then I thought we could do this Sally and the Sparrows.
You guys want the lights off?
Yeah.
Story and our read today is called Sally and the Sparrows by introducing Sally and the Sparrows. Amy supports her young readers.
Hold on. I just want to make sure this is all put in here. Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know why the speakers aren't working. Debbie, do you know these speakers? I thought it would work. For Stacy, for Debbie, yeah. Oh, this is perfect.
Here, wait, is it on now?
Yep.
To successfully process this instructional level text, she encourages the children to respond to and enjoy the story while keeping the lesson instructional and on task. This is Sally. And one day Sally woke up early in the morning and she heard some sparrows out in her garden. Cheep, cheep, cheep is what she heard. And she
sparrows to come down and see her so she could get a better look at them, but they wouldn't come out of the tree. So Sally finds a way to get them to come down out of the tree. Think bread would work? Bread or some bird seed.
Or climbing up.
Or maybe climbing up to get them down.
But that would scare them, yeah.
And then they might fly away. So she's going to have to find something that they want,
I know
right?
it's bread.
Ah, you might be right. We're going to look through this story and talk about it a little bit. And then we're going to read through it. All right, make sure you keep your books down. Sally and the Sparrows. If you turn to the first page of this story, you see those little sparrows up in the tree? They are saying, cheep, cheep, cheep.
There's sheep.
Sheep. Cheep starts with CH like chicken and cheese.
C-H-E-E-P.
Everybody put their finger under the word cheep.
Cheep, cheep, cheep.
Can you cheep like those birds? Cheep, cheep, cheep. That's exactly what they sound like. Cheep, cheep, cheep. They woke up. Okay, good cheeping. You can stop now. They woke up when the sun came up, and Sally woke up too. There she is. You see her. She's not staying in bed. Her mom is in bed, but she's not going to stay in bed. She's going to go see those sparrows. And there she is in her garden. Say garden.
Garden.
Let's clap garden. Garden. How many syllables? Two syllables in garden. Are those little sparrows going to come down and see her, you think?
Yes.
You think they'll come right down? Let's see. Did they come down? No, they stayed in the tree.
She's getting some bread.
Oh my goodness, you need to be where I am, Katie.
That's the same picture on the front.
Thank you. That is the same picture on the front, where they looked down at her, but they stayed up in the tree. And then she thought of something. She thought they might be hungry, so she's going to go get something. Do you see the bread box back there? That's where they keep their bread. Bread box, yeah.
What do they do with bread?
She's going to get some bread because she knows sparrows like bread.
Why do they have in a box?
Does anybody know why they keep bread in a box sometimes? We keep our bread in a box.
You do?
Mm-hmm. Doesn't look exactly like that, but it's kind of like that. For one thing, it keeps our bread from getting all squashed. And for another, it keeps it in a cool place and it just helps it stay fresher longer. That's a bread box.
I don't know why.
Well, that's true. We keep it in the bag and then we put it in there. Not everybody uses a bread box, do they? But Sally's got a bread box, and that's where she looked for her bread. Now, she's a little hungry too. Look, she took a bite of her bread already. Is this going to work, you think?
Yes.
She gives it to the sparrows and she says, "Here you are, little sparrows." Everybody say, "Here."
Here you are, little sparrow.
Let's find that word here. What would you expect to see at the beginning? An H. Put your finger under the word here. Here. Good job, Chris. Here. Some of you are framing it. Good job. Here. You found it, Dylan? So she's calling them down. Here you are, little sparrows. Are they going to stay up in the tree or are they going to come down?
Come down. Come down.
Are you right?
Yes.
Did they come down? They did came. They came right down. She got them out of there, those hungry sparrows.
Don't move a muscle, Missy.
If she moves, what will happen? It'll fly away.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to let you read Sally and the Sparrows and how she got those hungry sparrows to come down.
Sally and the Sparrows.
Let's do some whisper reading. Whisper reading. We'll start right here with you, Miss Mia, okay? You could read a tiny bit louder. Put your fingers out, sweetie. Put your fingers out there. Read with your eyes. Put your fingers out. Can you read that part again with no fingers? What part do you know in that word, Chris?
Sally
Good job.
down into the tree. Are hungry? Said Sally. Said the sparrow.
Smart work, Chris. You went back to make sure that that looked right. Good job. All right. Close your books for a second. So some of you predicted bread, didn't you?
Because they already knew it.
You already knew it? How many of you have ever given birds bread? Have you ever fed birds?
We put that on the table.
You did? And did they come down and get it? So Sally had a good idea, didn't she, to get that bread and get them out of the trees? Now, you know, Sally does a lot of talking in this story. She does a lot of talking. She's having a conversation with herself and with those birds sometimes. Turn to page 5. How do we know that Sally's talking? What does the author do for us to let us know? Those marks right there, that's right, those quotation marks to let us know that Sally is doing some talking. So, she does a bunch, doesn't she? Now, I'm going to read the first part of what she says, and I'm going to read it like, I'm Sally and I'm talking. I'm not going to stay in bed, she said. We have to read it with expression, don't we? I'm not going to stay in bed. Can you find the other quotation marks in the second sentence where she talks again, Dylan?
Second sentence?
Put your fingers on the quotation marks. That's right, Katie. That's where she talks the second time. This is where she talks the first time. Where does she talk the second time? She's still telling herself what she's going to do.
That's on the third row.
There you go.
I'm doing all of them.
Well, let's read the second one together. First she says, I'm not going to stay in bed. And then she says, I'm going to go and see the sparrows. Let's do that one more time with good expression. I'm going to go and see the sparrows. When you read what the character's saying with quotation marks, you do it with expression.
Thank you.
That's right. If she said thank you, you'd say it just like that, wouldn't you? Great work. All right.
I have an English accent.
Can I have your books back? We're going to do a little bit of word work.
And I love the
I'm glad you love word work. It must be because you're so smart.